Hi, everyone. We're just going to let people trickle into the Zoom. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Ariana Baker-Jukes. I am the Public Affairs Manager at SCAMP, and we're so excited to kickstart off our roundtable series. This is about survivor services and permanent supportive housing. So the purpose of this conversation is we'll get more into the details shortly, but I just wanted to welcome you all to this conversation where we explore the intersection of supportive services for domestic violence survivors in the permanent housing space. This will be the first of our series, so there will be a bit of introductions in the beginning, exploring kind of the background of the committee, of the coalition that we'll be hearing from today, and hearing more about what's actually happening right now on the ground in the supportive services realm. So to kick us off, to do a bit of background, we're going to hear from two folks today. Elizabeth Eastland, who is the founder of the Los Angeles Domestic Violence Services, Homeless Services Coalition, excuse me, I might have messed that up, and the former executive director of Rainbow Services, a domestic violence support organization. And we'll also hear in the beginning from Susan Kokowitz, a DVHSC advocate, that's the acronym that Elizabeth will explain more, and a LA County Department of Mental Health certified mental health advocate who's currently working at the Downtown Women's Center in Skid Row. After they speak, we'll hear from our panelists and then we'll go into the audience Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth and Susan to give us a bit of background before we start our panel. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariana, and welcome everyone. We're so excited to welcome you to this very first roundtable discussion between the Domestic Violence Homeless Services Coalition and the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. My name is Elizabeth Eastland. I'm one of the co-founding members of the Los Angeles DV Homeless Services Coalition. I also want to say happy DVAM. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's why a number of us are wearing purple to honor the survivors that have been lost to intimate partner violence, but also to all the service providers, advocates, and people supporting survivors in this work in this field. For those of you who are not familiar with the DV Homeless Services Coalition, we're made up of over 450 organizations and over 800 individuals that are interested in creating a more equitable homeless system that includes survivors and women. And we just got a huge win with the state signing, the governor signing Senate Bill 914 that will require every community in California that receives state funding to address homelessness to ensure that they include survivors and women in their plans to end homelessness. This is what we've been working towards. And we're just so grateful because that bill was co-sponsored by Downtown Women's Center, Rainbow Services, and the California Partnership to End DV. So Downtown Women's Center and Rainbow Services co-lead this coalition. And while most of our convenings with the coalition, we ask you to think outside the box, leave the needs of your organization at the door. Today, we want you to think about your organization and what you need to learn in order to create permanent housing for survivors. The DV field has been focused on crisis and shelters and transitional housing since the beginning of our movement. We need to get on board with permanent housing. And Susan will share a little bit more about why this committee was created, or I guess I'm sharing, because this is my next point. We created this exploratory committee on permanent housing partnerships last December to explore how to increase the number of affordable permanent housing units dedicated to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. those who are experiencing homelessness now in Los Angeles. And we began learning about low-income housing tax credits and how to build affordable housing. And we've been exploring other funding opportunities and other partnerships. And from the beginning of this committee, we really wanted to be inclusive of survivors of human trafficking and sexual assault. And we want to ensure that the voice of lived experience is present in all we do. And that's why I've invited Susan to share a little bit more about the coalition, the committee, and our commitment to working with people with lived experience. Susan is one of the original DV Homeless Service Coalition advocates, and I'm proud to be her ally. Susan. You're on mute, Susan.
There we go. Thanks, Elizabeth. Sorry about that. From the outset, the Domestic Violence Homeless Services Coalition, or DVHSC, was to, and I'm quoting from the website, to create a client-centered system that increases access to safe housing, supportive services for survivors of domestic violence and their families, with an emphasis on integrated trauma-informed care. And what I'm picking out of that quote is the client-centered system. And to focus on the various issues of that work, the DVHSC created 3 work groups: systems and funding, training, education, and then the client-centered work group. This, one of the first things they did was they conducted a series of county-wide focus groups that looked at the needs of survivors who had experienced homelessness, and one of the outcomes of that process was a realization that in order to create survivor-centered solutions, the voices of women with lived experience were needed. So the Advocates program was created, and as Elizabeth mentioned, I'm part of the original cohort. And why is lived experience important? People with lived experience offer insight into how the system directly impacts the community it was designed to serve. Spotting knock-on effects of potential solutions, and which can bring change or have unintended consequences, is a key value add. And the participation of people with lived experience brings projects and partnerships a chance to design equitable solutions by offering those directly impacted a seat at the table. The committee so DVHSC was introduced to the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, which I'll refer to as SCAF going forward, and began to discuss a joint roundtable convening to explore the topic with a broader community of providers and housing developers. DVHSC is proud to partner with SCAF to present a series of roundtables aimed at increasing the knowledge of housing development for the domestic violence field, and simultaneously educating housing developers of the need for more housing units and important considerations when housing survivors. So we're proud to work together to develop solutions to our current crisis of survivors experiencing homelessness. And with that, I'm going to give it back to you, Ariana.
Thank you both so much. So as Elizabeth and Susan so eloquently explained, this is the time for partnerships, and we're so excited to have SCAMP members on this call today to learn more about what's actually being done on the ground. And so to do that, we're going to pass it off and we'll hear from Pat Bell and Melissa Pitts of House of Ruth. House of Ruth is an organization, as I explained earlier, that provides domestic violence support to folks on the ground who are experiencing intimate violence. Pat Bell is the executive director and CEO of House of Ruth Pomona, and has been an advocate in the domestic violence movement for over 15 years. And then Melissa Pitts is a Southern California native who's the chief program officer of House of Ruth, where she oversees all programs at the agency. Then we're going to hear from Joseph Bradford III, who is the founder of Bare Truth, a nonprofit dedicated to eradicating homelessness. And we're going to hear about how Joseph has taken his own personal experiences with shelter life and homelessness to lead an organization that provides to thousands of folks on Skid Row housing and health support, and now even supportive housing services. So with further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Pat and Melissa of House of Ruth to talk about their organization and what it's like what it means to support survivors of domestic violence. So with that, Pat, if you want to share your screen.
Thank you, Ariana. While I get my slides up here.
While you're doing that, Pat, just meant to say to the group, as a heads up, this is recorded. The slides will be sent out following the conversation. And for any questions you have, please place them in the Q&A box. That makes it easier for us to manage at the end when we do group Q&A. It's at the bottom of your screen towards the right. The chat's great to introduce yourself and have conversations, but if you have questions for the panelists, the Q&A box is the best bet. Thanks, Pat. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ariana. My name is Pat Bell. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and kick off the first of our roundtable series. And House of Ruth was invited to present a real live example that we've been living with for the past 10 years in terms of a permanent supportive housing example. But before I do that, I'd like to just share with you briefly, House of Ruth has been practicing domestic violence services, serving those vulnerable communities for the last 45 years. We offer services to residents of Los Angeles County and San Bernardino County. So we cross services over two county areas, multiple cities within those counties, many city relationships, lots of neighborhoods that we're working within. We do provide emergency shelter, transitional shelter. We have a comprehensive housing program that you'll hear a little bit more about. We offer case management, counseling services, adult and children's therapy. We are all considered trauma-informed experts in this community, and domestic violence is our passion, and our mission is dedicated to preventing domestic violence and ensuring those that experience it feel safe and have resources to be able to carry on. So with permanent supportive housing specifically, we want to share with you an example of two housing units that we had an opportunity to take over about 10 years ago. The City of Rancho Cucamonga Housing Authority acquired two foreclosed condominiums within their city limits. That was back when the mortgage crisis was going on. And they utilized neighborhood stabilization funds to acquire these two properties. Once they secured them, they reached out to us as a service provider and offered us the opportunity to use these two individual condos as permanent supportive housing units for our families. And we had not done this before, so we, asked a lot of questions and had the discussions with our partner in the Housing Authority. And we agreed to operate these units under a conditional agreement. And it took quite a bit of back and forth conversations to really develop what their expectations were and how that would meet the needs of how we provide domestic violence services within housing units. So we came up with what were the agreed upon conditions, and we executed a real estate transaction, and the property titles were transferred to House of Ruth. Now, the conditions that we agreed to, let's see here. We operate the two condos following HUD guidelines. The families that we screened to move in there, we performed income verification on them. We ensure that we're maintaining annual certification with what their income levels are. Part of the agreement is if we decide at any point during the ownership of these two condos, if we're no longer able to operate them or unable to deliver the supportive services, the city has the first right of refusal to take the condos back. All of this was laid out within the contract that we signed with the city. We've had the condos now for about 10 years. We have two families that live in them. And one of the questions that came up as we were discussing this with our colleagues is, what are some of the hidden expenses that come along with it, as well as, the upfront expenses? For us to operate these condos annually, of course, we have to pay the HOA fees. Each of these condominiums is in a separate condominium complex within the city of Rancho Cucamonga. So we have two different homeowners associations that we work with, and we pay the HOA fees for each one. You know, as a landlord, we also pay water and trash. The tenant pays the gas and electricity. And then we apply annually for a property tax exemption status. And we have to reapply for that every year, but that does provide a significant savings on the property tax for these two units that we own. Then we also have a property management company, and that Melissa will get a little bit more into that during her section, but the property management company for us is important. We pay the annual fees to them to handle the rent collection. They handle all the lease agreements with new tenants that might be moving in. And if we do run into any snags where we have to approach any type of eviction with a tenant, then they will handle legal representation with that as well. And then what I'd like to do, so that kind of gives you the background on how we acquired these two properties, you know, fiscally, how we manage them. And I want to pass the mic over to Melissa to talk through a little bit about how this has impacted our family's programmatically and what some of our learnings are. So Melissa, I'm going to ask you to carry on.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So what are some of the benefits of this model and this program? One, we're housing survivors. Like that was so important for us to enter into this partnership, because for us, it was something that was unheard of, someone actually wanting to give us properties for survivors of domestic violence. So we definitely jumped on it with enthusiasm. However, we didn't think it all out back 10 years ago. But today, some of the benefits that we offer are mobile advocacy. And if some of you on the call haven't heard of that term, that's when we collaboratively work with survivors in the community, helping them to achieve and maintain independence, safety, and housing. And it's on their terms. So we reduce not so much a barrier, but them having to come into the office and receive services and, just kind of things on the organization's terms, where we actually go to them and we go in their community and we get to know them. And that's just, built-in support that we need as service providers to really see their self-identified success and goals. And the other thing about mobile advocacy, especially if it's done in the home, we have a front seat to what would be really beneficial if a client was struggling, if they were just struggling with maybe housekeeping and managing their children. We're there and we can gently offer support and resources. So mobile advocacy has really fared to be beneficial in a program like this. And as I said, it also provides the ability to achieve goals for long-term safety and stability. The great thing about this partnership with Rancho Cucamonga is if the clients qualify, they can stay. There's no time limit in this. But what we have found is, as knowing that the families that we're serving, they have no deadlines, they really are able to focus in on their goals and their future and the future of their family, and then they transition out. Some have gone on to purchase a home because this program really afforded them the ability to do so. And then it's also, just a housing model that we are fortunate enough to share with you all and really talk about partnerships with flexible systems. And we're just so excited that we're able to share this, and we're hopeful that more communities will be able to tap into this type of program. So what are some of our learnings? As Pat said, it's so important to diagnose your program's strengths and weaknesses. Does your agency budget support the ownership of these condos and the expenses that come with it. You know, when we acquired these condos, we didn't have a grant to support it. It wasn't budgeted into our agency budget at the time. And so we took on this program, but we had to work towards making sure that we were able to sustain some of the expenses that come along with it. And then I just want to say, stay in your lane, like also know who you are. Initially, maybe we didn't know who we are. We really thought that we could be landlords and service providers. But the truth of the matter is we are trauma informed, workers, and we want to be there and offer, survivor centered advocacy. And so sometimes that really clouded our vision with being a landlord, and we found ourselves in pickles. So kind of a couple of years in, we just thought, hey, it's good to partner with a property manager so that they do what they do best and we do what we do best. And that's, we support our families in being successful, but we don't have to play good cop, bad cop with them. That just doesn't work in the relationship. And we are all about connection and the relationship. So that was really helpful for us. Another component that we offered is tools for tenants. And so that's just an orientation at the beginning of a lease up with families, that we just want them to know all of their rights. We want them to know their rights as domestic violence survivors, any barriers that they just may have. Maybe this is their first time even living on their own with their children, and making sure that they have the support and the resources in the community, any programs out there, CARE, FARA, any discount programs that would really just help them sustain their home. And so that's also proven to be beneficial, and they know that they can circle back with their case manager if they need to tap into any of those things that were introduced to them at the onset of their lease up. And then just really leaning into whole person services. When you are working with a client for a period of time, you will automatically identify that being a survivor of domestic violence is just a piece of their story. And if we are going to partner with them in their journey to healing and their journey to sustaining permanent housing, we want to really make sure that we're supporting all needs that they have, if it's in our ability to do so. So that's what I really mean with leaning into whole person services. And again, just identifying, as Susan said, those lived experiences, and really understanding that survivors are the experts in their lives, and we are just here to provide those resources for them. And so bridging the gap, I will say our counterpart here, Joseph from Bear Truth, he's going to really get in and give you all some great gems. But for our experience with this, with these two condos that we have, is looking back, we would say that we would spend more time with the HOA association. We would let them know that, in fact, we are the owners of the unit. And then the minute that they found out that it was a domestic violence agency, I think that maybe their fears, their myths, their stereotypes really grew, and our presence just wasn't strong. And so if you all ever have this opportunity, I would say introduce your organization, any service provider, introduce your organization, make sure that they maybe have a quick understanding of domestic violence 101, and let them also, just understand that, again, domestic violence and being a survivor of domestic violence is just a part of that person's story. That doesn't represent their whole lives. And also, you have to kind of set boundaries and introduce the confidentiality. We're the homeowners. HOA should be dealing with us. Our families are the tenants. We will deal with them. And we mean that in the nicest way, but we do have families to protect. So with that said, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Joseph, who is going to really talk about neighborhood relationships and the importance of them.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Bradford III, and I am the president and founder of Bear Truth. And we are a nonprofit organization here in the Los Angeles area, but I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and my domestic violence past goes back a long way. My mother was a victim of domestic violence. We were forced into homelessness because our house caught on fire. So we were going through two different situations at the exact same time. And since we lived in the shelter, I knew exactly what that was and what that looks like. So right now, my organization is dedicated to helping people from all walks of life: domestic violence, homeless. We work with the youth, the DCFS kids that are transitioning out of the shelters. So for me, a big part of everything that we do is just the relationship. So the relationship with my tenants here in Los Angeles, I'm housing almost 100 people in our shared housing facilities throughout the city. But for me, the importance is really the community aspect. So getting to know my neighbors so that if something's happening at my properties or anything is going on, like they have a contact, because in everything we do at every apartment building, there's always something going on. And I just think it's good to know who's the person to contact. So for me, I try to like butter up my neighbors. For every Thanksgiving, we're giving out, I give my neighbors turkey. Here in a couple of weeks, it's Halloween. So I'm giving out candy. I give out backpacks to the whole community. And I think those are important because when I'm not around or something's going on, my neighbors are also there looking out for me, looking out for my tenants, looking out for the neighborhood. And I think it's important. I used to run a building on the west side, closer to Marina Del Rey. Well, none of those neighbors wanted that building there once they found out we were housing, homeless individuals. But I changed that perception because I was outside, I was there, I was meeting, I was talking to them, and then they got to know me, and then they was able to get to know my tenants because of me, because of the relationships, because of the activities and the events that I put on in the neighborhood. And I included them. I made them feel a part of something versus us over here and them over there. Like, that's not the way we do it. I really try to engage with everyone around, build those relationships up, because that's the only way that we get things done. When I was a kid, I used to feel like people didn't help us enough. My mother had five little kids. I'm the oldest, and I just feel like people was just kind of left us over there to the side. And I really think if more people in the community, more people around, the more people in the neighborhood would have engaged with us, I think that would have made a bigger impact on our lives. But I'm also a product of it because of what I didn't have. So everything that we do now is based off of that. And my thing to you guys is always just think about how you want to be treated. Like, these are all people too. Everybody is going through something, and we just need a chance. And that's all that I'm asking for everybody is just a chance. Give the tenants a chance, give the neighbors a chance to understand what we're doing. I don't always tell everybody exactly who I'm housing. Do they know that I have people? Yes, of course. But the specific situations, I leave that very, very confidential. But it's good that they know me. I'm there, I'm present, I'm giving. I always start with giving. That's my thing. If I give first, then that opens up the conversation. And that's what it's about. Just giving first. And let's give these people somewhere to live. Let's give them a good place, a good home, and in a nice neighborhood. Everybody likes to live in a nice neighborhood. So building those community, hosting events, inviting people in. I invite my volunteers to my places. I invite the community to my places, and then it just strengthens the community as well. So for me, I think this building communities and building the relationships is something that's vital to the success of all of our survivors and the people that's going through any type of trauma.
Oh, Pat, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Joseph. That was, really important to hear some of those suggestions. And, it leads me to think of just a question or two. Joseph, when you started doing work in the Los Angeles area down there, what were some of the barriers that you might have encountered with some of the neighbors?
I just think it was the perception that they thought of a certain demographic of people. I think
Yeah.
they already had a preconceived idea of who or what a homeless person looks like or what domestic violence looks like. And it was always this, that's not us, that's them. And that not us is them. It just puts up a wall, it puts up a barrier because now we on this side don't want to talk to you and you over there don't want to talk to us. But we're all people, we're all living in this, we're all going through it. There's so many people suffering through mental illness or domestic violence situations right now, your neighbor that you just don't know about it because you did not see it. You don't see it or you maybe don't hear it. Sometimes it's right in your face, but sometimes it's behind closed doors. There's so much more stuff going on behind closed doors than what we actually know. And so I think if we all understand that it could happen to you, it could happen to me. You know what I mean? And so once I realized that, then it was a little bit different. And I feel like because I had the lived experience as a kid, like I've watched my mother, go through some things and where I said, you know, if I was bigger, when I get older, like I will never let that happen to her again. Like I will never. And so because I understand that, I understand the other side. And because I understand the other side, it was easy to have the conversation to say, no, we're all the same. Like we're literally just all the same. You might have just had a different opportunity than me, or vice versa. And so that's why I wanted to bring you in. And I think that the more and more we bring people closer to like what we're doing, the easier people can say, oh, this is it. This is completely different than what I thought.
Melissa, can you talk a little bit about what some of the things our housing navigators do within our housing program to improve relationships with landlords?
Sure. I mean, our organization has 2 housing navigators. We spend a lot of time just community networking, engaging in new relationships. Once a relationship appears to be forming, we invite them to our organization. We give them tours, any events that our agency has, we offer throughout the year. We make sure that they receive the invitations if there's an opportunity to just bring awareness to their partnership, whether it be on our website or an announcement in a meeting that we're all at. We just try to lift up their support and really tap into their ability to want to support our community. I think that's really important. And then again, if they want to invite us to any of their staff meetings or any events that they're having just to provide education, we do so.
Great. So do either of you have any ideas or suggestions on how we as service providers could make ourselves available to permanent supportive housing developers? How do we make these connections?
You know what? That's what I've been struggling with that since I moved to California. I've been trying to do these different things, but like I said earlier, for me, it's always been about giving first, doing the different things first. Like I said, like right now, I'm down here on Skid Row. So every Thursday and Sunday, we feed down here. I feed hundreds of people every week. But one of the things that we've introduced a little bit over a year ago, I have medical doctors that come out to the streets once a month. And we service 150 people. But even the key with that, is building the relationships. I'm down here every week and I get to see them. I'm wearing my shirt and I built that relationship. And I also give food. I'm giving something away every single time, so even to see the doctors or to provide whatever we're giving out to people, it was the relationship. And I actually understood what they need versus what I think I should give them. So again, that's the the way that you have to get out here, you have to talk to people, you have to talk to who you're trying to serve, because you can spend your whole day trying to give them something that they don't need. And guess what? Now we're going to waste a lot of money. We're going to waste a lot of time and our efforts. And you're going to go home feeling unfulfilled because they're not getting it. You're not getting it. You're mad. They're mad. And that's just the wrong way to do it. And so for the developer, I see like you guys need to talk to people. You know, you guys need to talk to the ones that's out here doing the work. We're doing it. We just need an opportunity, just like the people that we're trying to serve. I think that's the best way for me, honestly.
And if I can just, first of all, I echo everything that Joseph's saying, but I would also really challenge organizations to make sure that you're recruiting board members that are connected to, the housing population. The great thing is, we now have a new board president, and he has some connections and recently connected us with Jamboree, a housing developer that is definitely interested in supportive housing. And we had an opportunity to go on a tour and see some of the things that they're doing in Orange County. And our president is really like, this is his lane. And so he's like, I want to have a committee. And so the great thing about that is, we're all passionate advocates, and we're on the ground doing work every day. We're representing families that are in need, but we also recognize we need people with access, and we have to connect those heartstrings, people who have resources, but they're very passionate about our work. That's who we want on our board, and that's, we need a working board. We need you all with all this money to go out there and make it happen for our communities that are in need.
The other relationship piece I just want to add as well, we would not have secured those 2 Rancho condos if we hadn't had a relationship with the city through CDBG funding. So we invest a lot of our time in grant writing for local cities, and we have about 6 different city CDBG funds, and that just continues to place our agency at the top of their minds. So when they come across opportunities like acquiring these 2 foreclosed condos, they'll contact us as their local nonprofit preferred provider. So that's just relationship building again at a city official level. Are there any questions in the chat box, Ariana?
Yeah, so at this point, we will transition to general questions. I also have some questions for you as well. After reading what folks are saying in the chat box and hearing how the conversation you've been having, which thank you all so much for being here. We're all learning so much from you. So one of the questions that before we go more into the city relationship building, Melissa, you were talking about bringing, making sure that folks with lived experiences are included on the boards, are included in these conversations. So one question I have for everyone, including Susan, including Elizabeth, if you'd like to chime in, is can you talk more about the DV Homeless Services Coalition? If there's, are folks from the PSH world on that coalition, how do we get people at that table so that the through line is happening? Just can anyone respond to that portion of it? Oh, Elizabeth, you're muted.
I guess that's an Elizabeth question, yes. So with the DV Homeless Services Coalition is organized in a few ways. We have a core team that is essentially like the executive board. So we have a number of shelter programs on that core team, but also DWC, who runs permanent housing. But that's kind of the whole purpose of this exploratory committee, is to get more housing developers interested in the work and to create these partnerships, right? So while we are a larger coalition, what we're hoping to do is to connect interested housing developers with organizations like Bare Truth or House of Ruth, who want to continue building permanent housing for survivors.
Excellent. So after this conversation, when I send out my follow-up email, I'll make sure to include more information about this coalition for folks like Drina, who wrote in the chat, in hoping to connect, because that's fantastic. Going back to the city portion, so at SCAMP, we serve all of Southern California. And so what's great about this conversation, we have folks from Pomona, the IE, and we also have folks from LA, right? So I would love to hear both of a bit more of both of your individual experiences working within your localities, right? And ways that on the SCAMP level, because we do advocacy at a broad regional basis, hearing more from you all would be helpful.
So I guess my initial response is, we're based in Pomona. So we do have a relationship with the city of Pomona through, again, CDBG funding. We try to steward and continue to nurture those relationships through frequent, we'll go before their city council. October's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We were just there this week. We received a city proclamation. In February for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, we go and bring our youth advisory committee before them just to keep our services and our image and reputation in front of the city council members. We try to invite them over to attend events and participate in neighborhood outreach things that we do. The part that is tricky for us is because our service area is so broad. We have funding, we have CDBG funding from Chino Hills, Pomona, Rancho Cucamonga. Those are a lot of cities to continue to sustain those relationships and nurture and strengthen those relationships. So we really just try to make it a habit to always have them on our invitation list, always send them our newsletters, always make sure that we're, including a local city council member in something, just so that they can stay, House of Ruth can remain at top of mind for them.
And Ariana, if I can add to that, those efforts probably seem like efforts that every nonprofit make. But the power in those efforts, and never underestimating that, is we also had another opportunity we didn't speak about today, but because we attend all of those city meetings and just keep House of Ruth's name on the forefront, another city within our service area about 10 years ago as well offered us 14 units of 2 complexes that they had in their city, and they offered it to us for transitional housing for survivors of domestic violence for $1 a year. And it really came out of the blue. We certainly, once again, we accepted that offer. And so a little bit of what we were talking about earlier on in the PowerPoint about just learning curves and acquiring a property management company, it was because of these units as well. The city has decided to now go in a different direction, and we were bummed about that. But like in preparing for this, Pat and I were talking about, just yesterday, for 10 years, we actually paid $1 a year. Now, there was other costs associated with that, but we were able to house so many survivors of domestic violence for 18 months in units that they could afford, and they were able to identify future goals and move on. So that's the power of going to all those meetings.
So what I was gonna say is, I think that's great. Like I told you guys before, like that's unbelievable. But it's so extremely fantastic. But what my organization tries to do, we try to invite everybody out. We try to make sure that the people from the city are on our email list. We are applying for these grants and really trying to think outside the box. Like I said, when we're doing our backpack drive, I'm telling them, hey, we'll put your logo on everything. I put your logo on my head if you need me to, whatever. Like, we just want to get, more people to seeing what we're doing. And so more opportunities and ways to help. Like, you guys have been speaking about these very, very unique situations and just being present And I think that that's the most important thing, just being present. So that's what we try to do, is just be present in the community, be on these calls, be everywhere that we can, that we feel like that could make a difference for our population that we serve.
And I'll just add another plug for the coalition. One of our committees is the Systems and Funding Committee, and they are tasked with staying on top of policy opportunities, though also developing and building relationships with our policymakers. So we've been really successful with the city trying to get them to establish a lived experience advisory board for all things homelessness. We're close. And so in our systems and funding group, that's another area where we really do create relationships, and we do have some representatives from city and county departments on our calls as well.
Great. So I'd like to explore that a bit more. There's a few questions in the chat that I'll combine in terms of, you've all touched upon this, but you all do provide housing in some form. So can you talk a bit more about the acquisition process to the lessons learned while you're working with, lease up, operations, and service provision? Melissa, I know you were saying earlier, stay in your lane. Maybe we're not all meant to be landlords. Can you all talk about that and some of those lessons learned in particular?
Melissa,
Okay.
Yeah, Melissa, can you expand a little bit on, a lot of the housing options that we have available for our families are driven by funding sources. And, that causes us to really broaden our scope with, again, centering around what client decisions are. Melissa, can you speak a little bit about how we screen and place them into, whether it's a rental subsidy support or move-in assistance, or maybe it's an eviction prevention, and, just kind of how we juggle all of that underneath the housing umbrella within our domestic violence agency?
Okay, I actually think that that's just, again, survivor-led, survivor-driven advocacy. We start with what are their goals, and what support do they need, and what are some of their, even if they know, what are some of their long-term goals, what are their goals for right now, if they can only see past tomorrow. And I know that there was a question in the Q&A, and I can kind of wrap this up in this conversation about the safety of survivors and people that cause harm, finding them. So that's also in how we place folks. There might be some folks that just may need a little bit more support. So they may go into our 18-month program when we had them. But certainly, I think, Pat, just to answer your question, that it starts with the survivor. And so, what they need is how we move forward. And then Ariana, and also when it comes to a little bit of the question that you asked, when I said we had this opportunity last month to go to Jamboree, we really were able to view their properties and then look at our experiences with the units that we had. And there were some woulda, shoulda, coulda moments, but it was so valuable, because what they did as property developers is from the start, from the building of it, they partnered with supportive service agencies, counseling teams, down to the way that they actually designed the community centers. So I thought that was really transformative, that they really took this approach. And it was so great for me, because I'm taking notes, I'm going back to our shelter and doing some of this. But they also engaged the community. They were like, we don't want to build this apartment unit and it be that apartment unit. We want to integrate the community. And so even some of the supportive services that they offer, so they contract with several different service providers, but they also opened up those service providers to people in the community that don't reside in that building. And so those are all just wonderful notes that we could take, because we believe we're going to have that opportunity again. And I just think that those were some really great best practices that we all could learn from.
So So now I'll speak from a landlord side. I will tell everybody, being a landlord is not easy. There's nothing about this that is easy, but it's worth it. Okay, because if I got a guy or a mother with a couple kids that say, you know what, I would have died out there without you, that's why I do it, because that lady made me think of my mother and all five of my siblings, well, all four of my other siblings, you know. So it's not easy, but I just think it's the way that you do it. I think that the way that you start with people and you set the rules up and you have the lease, and this is what we go by. You know, I tell people, I'm not your friend, I am friendly.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm here to help you, and I try to bring in as many services. If you know, if my organization does not provide them, I try to bring in there's many services, and I'm trying to just do my best. Like literally, I'm thinking of them as a person, but I'm also talking to them, asking them what they need, because every one of my tenants right now needs something different from me, just like my kids. My kids, both of them need a little bit different of me one day to the next or moment to moment. And so if I'm thinking of them like that, then it's what can I do to serve you? And I ask them that, what are you looking for? Some people are trying to work, some people are just want to chill for a little bit. But even if you want to chill, well, what does that look like? How long do you need? Are you trying to work? Do you need help getting a driver's license? Do you need help doing this? And so from there, and I always try to uh, encourage them, because everybody goes through whatever else, but I think that encouragement piece is a lot. And I tell them that I'm proud of them, you know, and I tell them and I love them. Just that's just what I do. But that's the connection that I try to have with all of them. Not saying that it goes great with all of them. Not saying that everyone doesn't, you know, present a different set of challenges, but it's doable. And for those that maybe we can't, you know, did you give it your best? I gave it my best shot, and I treat everybody the same.
So I'm curious to know, and this kind of goes to Catherine's question in the Q&A box, but it seems like a way that you get your clients and the folks who are staying, whether living, you know, in your buildings or are part of your transitional housing program, you get them from relationships built on the ground. I'm curious to know if you also have any relationship to coordinated entry systems, because I think that there is, for our developers, there seems to be sometimes difficulty in connecting the people with the locations because there's just such an influx and it's a hard. So I'm curious to know if that's something that you all, if there's a city run or a county run system that you're a part of as well.
I can start this one. So the domestic violence field traditionally is not part of coordinated entry, though the county and our continuum of care in Los Angeles does support 8 DV regional coordinators. So each service planning area or SPA has a specific DV regional coordinator located within the family system. So there's 3 different coordinated entry systems, right? For singles, families, and day, which is transition age youth. There is not a specific one for DV. DV cuts across all populations. And I think
Right.
speaking to the confidentiality question, part of our struggle right now is we need all housing from emergency shelter to the permanent housing. Part of what we've seen in the DV field is in our shelters or families, singles whose violence was months and months ago. So they aren't technically fleeing a dangerous situation right now. They may have been homeless for 6 months, but we take them in because there's nowhere else. If we can help those people kind of transition into their own permanent housing, whether it's through our rapid rehousing programs, DV Housing First, then that opens up the shelter spots for those who are truly fleeing dangerous situations. And within this committee, we've talked a lot about how as we build permanent housing units for survivors, we will have to have different assessments to ensure that they are safe in whatever building they're going to, especially if it's a building that's advertised as being, you know, a specific housing project funded specifically for survivors, which is not something we typically do or advertise, though I think we need to get there, right? There's so many people, so many of our unhoused neighbors who've experienced domestic violence. In the LACOC, it's 39%. and yet we don't spend enough time talking about it.
I wanted to get to a question that Susan is currently working on in the Q&A box, but it's something that's comes up in a lot of conversations in the PSH realm, which is, many of my clients refuse to live at Skid Row. How would I make Skid Row more appealing to them? All of you have some relationship, or most of you, I know Elizabeth and Joseph and Susan, with working at Skid Row. I would love to hear your thoughts on how you would respond to a question like this.
Well, I certainly understand that one level of appeal is that there are so many services in that area. I mean, a plethora. But my experience is that when I was going through homelessness, it was really important to me to stay in the area that I had become homeless in. I had lived in that area for like 25 years. I felt, no one feels safe outside. Okay, but I felt less unsafe. I knew the area, I was familiar. I knew the stores, I knew the neighborhoods, I knew where to catch buses, I knew where the, mental health clinic was. I knew where all of these things were. And that gave me some level of safety or familiarity, that if I had to go into a new neighborhood, that would all be gone. And again, all the services that I was receiving, whether it was at DPSS or if it was, like I said, I went to a county mental health clinic, medical, everything, and, of course, I had no vehicle or anything, so it was walkable. I knew where the bus stops. It just, when you're outside, you're so vulnerable and you feel so unsafe 24/7 that having anything that can reduce that level of vulnerability is really important. And I did go one time to a medical clinic in Skid Row during this time, and it was just awful experience. I was, for me, coming into the area, not knowing anything about it, and hearing that there were great services there, but also seeing so many people suffering, and it was tough. It was too much. And so I would encourage people who to see, where does the client feel comfortable, what neighborhood are they in, and then try to come up with solutions to support them there, if at all possible. That's it.
Susan, thank you so much for lifting all that up, because I think that is such an important thing to remember, for anyone out there that is looking to secure a property, any kind of a property anywhere, just to really be mindful of how close is the public transportation, where is the closest medical clinic, where's the grocery store, and just be mindful of all of that. And then that's where mobile advocacy comes in really handy, because then a staff member that might be assigned as a case manager or a community coordinator can really do a neighborhood walkthrough with the family that's moving in, so that they really feel good about the place that they're moving into.
So I echo everything that they said, because all of my places are right on the bus line, very close to everything. And this is where I'm saying getting to know your population, because you can't take this person that's grew up in LA and be like, you know what, let's ship you to Victorville. Like, it doesn't work. They're not gonna go. And then now on the outside is gonna be like, well, hey, we provided housing, but it's in the middle of nowhere. Nobody wants to go there. And that we're all chasing security. We all have a house or car, or some of us do, some of us don't, but we all want that sense of security. That's why we hang around our families during holidays or birthdays, and so it's that same type of community feel. I feel like that we were designed to be around people and be around things that feel good. And now if you disrupt that, and if you take us from that, then now people that's already suffering from their own traumas, you're just gonna build an even bigger wall. And it doesn't make sense. And now if you put us there, where now I got to take 2 hours on the bus carrying so many different groceries, like, the people are not going to do that. And so if we really want to help people, that's what I said, let's help them the way that they need to be helped, not the way that we think that they need to be helped, because it's not going to work. And then, like I said, we're going to waste our money. And I'm saying, let's not waste the money. Let's do it. Yeah, there could be better You know, we could do a lot of different things better. Skid Row does not look great. Like I said, I'm here sitting on Skid Row right now. It doesn't look great, but there's a way to do it. And I just think that we're just throwing a lot of money at these problems, but we're not throwing the money the right way, if I could say that.
So I want to take two more questions. The first one from Steve is for housing compliance requirements. So when you're applying for these CDBG grants or any grants or funding for that matter, that is for folks, for survivors, what classifies someone as being a survivor of DV? Is there certain documentation you have to show? What exactly does that look like to get that funding specified for that group of folks?
Melissa, you want to take that one? You're on mute.
I was actually going to defer to Elizabeth.
I was going to defer to Pat. No, let's just do
Okay.
this.
We can do it together collectively.
Yes.
In terms from this victim standpoint, it is literally just their statement. It's their sworn statement. And then different funders ask different things, but we are always like advocating and fighting that less proof about someone being a survivor is important, because, you know, oftentimes there's a lot of systems that don't believe survivors. And the last thing we want to do as a service provider organization is make them jump through hoops to prove their survivorship. So we advocate with that on policy, on landlord level, and obviously partnering with you all to develop programs from ground up. We certainly want that to be the foundation of your understanding.
Yeah, I would just add, you know, there are some housing authorities that don't require survivors to have like a service provider validify their survivorship. We really just need to trust when survivors come in for service or applying for housing that they are survivors, right? So at Rainbow Services, when I was there, our approach was, what is the least amount of information I need to ask in order to support this person?
Right.
That is a
Right.
trauma-informed approach. We just need to start from a place of believing people rather
Right.
than how our government operates, which is a place of fear that we're going to rip them off. So let's just start with that and go from there.
Like, I agree with that. I just think that sometimes less is more. You know, like if you're asking people that's already been through so much to prove it, like, what do you want them to do? Lift up their shirt or show you a picture of a black eye? You know what I mean? It's like, let's help people. You know, they're coming to you. If they're coming to you and they're already mentally prepared to tell you something's happened to them, I think at that point we need to move forward.
Exactly. I think it is extremely hard for someone to share.
Yes.
Like, I am
Yeah.
a survivor.
Yeah.
So if someone's
Yeah.
actually sharing that, we need to see that as
Yeah.
bravery, you
Yeah.
know, and not
Yeah.
question it.
Yeah. Like my mother walking into a place with 5 little kids. Like, I don't think she wants to be here. I think there's so many other places that she would prefer to be. And how embarrassing is that to her, for her kids, for anybody that knows her? Yeah, no, like let's help her. And that was a lot of problems that we had. We had to jump through a bunch of hoops. So then, you know, of course, now she's gonna get frustrated. Then now that'll cause a person to relapse if they have a substance abuse problem, or maybe even go back to where she feels comfortable. That's probably dangerous. But because they won't help her over here, then now I'm forced to go back here because now she's worried about her kids, you know. And I've watched my mama do some stuff for her kids that if she was in a different situation, she probably wouldn't have made that same choice.
Mhm.
And just to kind of land with Steve, because we can go on, as you can see, we're
Oh,
very
yeah.
passionate about this.
Yeah.
Too. But Steve, just to answer your question, we definitely collect demographic information. We may ask what types of abuse that someone has experienced. And then in the signature line, there's something like, you know, this is true. It's a, you know, true sworn statement, and they sign it. And so that's what we do.
Mhm.
Okay, interesting. So it seems like there's this fine balance between respect and, you know, dignity and respecting privacy, but also having to navigate the bureaucracy we all have to deal with providing services to folks. So I think that that's actually kind of you know, we've touched upon this at various different parts in this conversation, and I know Elizabeth will do a wrap up of the key points of learning, but just one last time, I'd like to hear for folks who do provide permanent supportive housing, that we have housing developers, what do you feel that we should know moving forward? One high level thing in your mind would be a good takeaway for us as housing providers.
We can be really great partners with you.
Right.
We can meet that need. We've got the experience to work with the most vulnerable populations and do it well. We all have passion for the work that we do, and if you property developers have the units, we will fill them, and we will make sure that everybody has a new start, a fresh start, and can really have a good working relationship together.
I would say that involve people lived experience as early as possible in your process, in the project. For example, where I work, you know, they're developing another building of units, you know, probably about 100 units, and they involve people lived experience immediately, even at the architectural level. So, you know, all the things, you know, about open spaces, but safety and various things that will really enhance the value of the property in terms of being supportive to the people it's designed for. So, and in many other ways, you don't want to start going down a wrong path, and like someone said earlier, that may end up just costing money to have to address later. So that's my bit for there. Ariana, you're muted.
Oh yeah, no, I was just giving it a second to let it all land because it's been great. I'm gonna hand it over to Elizabeth to wrap us all up, unless there's anything else that anyone wants to contribute to this conversation.
I just want to say thank you, everybody, for giving us this platform and allowing us to share a little bit about what we do. And like I said earlier, I'm from a small city in the middle of the map. We just looking for a chance. Everybody just wants a chance to help more people. Like I said, I'm a product of everything that we've been talking about, and I just want to just be there and do more for my community. So thank you guys for even listening to me. I never knew that all the many years ago when I started this that I would be here. So thank you, honestly.
I'd like to thank also on behalf of House of Ruth. You know, it's funny, Joseph, I think all of us are united in spirit because we've never met each other face to face other than on this Zoom call.
Right.
Yet, you know, we are just a team doing this work, and all of us on this call are actually wanting the same outcomes and the same results. So thank you to Ariana and Elizabeth for inviting us.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz, wrap us up.
All right. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone who joined this call, and to thank Susan, Pat, Melissa, Joseph, and Ariana for contributing to such a great roundtable. I did want to lift up a few of my favorite highlights. Melissa, when you talked about having flexible systems, partnerships with flexible systems, and knowing our lane, like that was the whole reason we built this exploratory committee, was because I knew at the time we built it, I was working at Rainbow Services. I knew Rainbow didn't need to go into the housing development piece, right? We didn't need to learn about that. We're experts in trauma-informed care and supporting survivors through their healing process. That's our lane. We want to partner, right, with people who do the housing development, and then getting connected to SCAMP. It's like, this is exactly what we've been hoping for. So that's definitely why we started this. Survivor-driven advocacy is at the core of our coalition, ensuring that survivors with lived experience have input. And then Joseph, you know, when you talked about building communities as being vital to our success, it is so important that groups like Bare Truth be given a platform, because so many grassroots groups out there, Joseph talked about housing over 100 people. right? He's not part of the point in time count. Like there are great groups out there. And so being able to connect them to groups like the coalition, to SCAMF, it's really important that we all support one another in our work and that we think outside of the box, right? Because coordinated entry is not helping very many people. We've got to create our own systems of that are based in trauma-informed care and just compassion for our unhoused neighbors. So I think that also addressing stereotypes is a big part of our job, breaking down that narrative that keeps women or keeps survivors from sharing their story, that keeps our systems from addressing survivors' needs, from addressing women's needs. We really need to keep talking about that. And we hope to in this committee as we continue our roundtables with SCAMP. The next one will be in December, so keep a look out in your emails from Ariana, who will announce that the December roundtable will focus on permanent supportive housing and how you do that with a trauma-informed lens. So Amy Turk from Downtown Women's Center will be leading that roundtable. And then for those of you interested in our coalition, I did want to invite you to our November 2nd meeting. If I can figure out how to get the link in there. We are in the midst of our strategic planning. And so our coalition has been around for 6 years, which is really incredible. And we hope to be able to get input from people who have been impacted by our work. And hopefully, oops, hold on one second. Here we go. And hopefully get some more voices in there. So I will put that link in the chat. Oops, it's not
And I'll
happening.
send it out to everyone
Okay.
too in a follow-up email with everyone's information as well.
Yeah, Ariana, if you could do that, then I could stop trying to get this.
Yeah.
It's not working. I think that's it. And just once again, thank you, Susan, Pat, Melissa, Joseph, and Ariana. We are so grateful, and to everyone who took the time this morning to be with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be in touch. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Bye.